I am Susan Lee. I am a PhD prepared nurse. When I lived on the Gulf Coast of Texas, I lived in a small 3,000 person community that I noticed driving back and forth to work from my little community that there were a lot of people crawling out from under the stilted buildings and out of dry docked boats and things like that. And so I became very interested in them, and then realized that a lot of them were veterans, because down at the Gulf area, it's very easy to live in that temperate climate and be unsheltered or homeless. And so my interest then focused on veterans one day when I was called to actually the VFW building, and actually on the 4th of July, because there was a veteran who had been living under that building who was struggling with his health. And so in this small community, you can imagine in a small community like that, I was one of the very few healthcare providers that were there. And so frequently people would call me to come help. And so when I got there, I realized he was critically ill. And we called for paramedics. And when the paramedics came, it was difficult to get them to stop at the place where we were. And so anyway, we finally got them stopped. And as they loaded up this man who was just a couple of years older than I was at the time, and yet he looked like he was every bit of 40 years older than I was, it occurred to me that he has a family and he has people who love him. And he also has veteran benefits because he was a gunner in the Vietnam War. So that led me to starting to pay attention to these people who were crawling out from under buildings and crawling out of dry dock boats, and then focusing on veterans because they have resources available to them, and why weren't they using them? Which led me to my PhD dissertation, which was the healthcare decision-making process of Vietnam veterans. And so I developed a grounded theory from what I found there. And basically what I found was that even though they have VA benefits, about half, you can divide the veterans up in about half of which ones will access the VA benefits and which ones will not. And they have their reasons, and I respect their reasons. With 18 million veterans in the United States right now, the VA can handle about half of them, which works out really well because half of them will go and half of them won't go. But the VA has been a fabulous resource for veterans, and they should all have access to their to their benefits if they need them. But part of that relies also on their conditions when they were discharged. There are 3 different types of discharge. One of them is honorable discharge, one of them is other than honorable, and one of them is dishonorable. And if they have dishonorable discharges, which they may not have any control over that, if they have dishonorable discharges and then they come home with no VA benefits, it makes it very difficult for them to reincorporate back into their communities and into their families, because they don't have any resources for getting jobs or getting educated or for their health care, struggling with their PTSD. And then they do end up homeless, which is unfortunate, and it's highly preventable. Both my parents were veterans. They both served in the military. My mother was an Air Force nurse. My dad was a navigator. They met and they got married, but they raised me to respect our country, respect our flag, respect our servicemen and women, and to respect our veterans. So that's really what led me to do it. And when I work with the homeless now, I think of them as my veterans, my homeless veterans. But veterans, whether they're homeless or whether they're veterans or not, the homeless people are very easy to work with, and they're not scary. And we need to remember that they are people, and we just need to care for them as we would anybody else. And that is one of the things that I've really learned from working in that little community and then bringing it forward to working here in a metropolitan area and continuing to work with the homeless shelter and continuing to work with the veterans in my community now. It doesn't end just because we go past one stage in our life. Just because I finished and I got the dissertation doesn't mean that it ended. When I started my dissertation program, one of the advisors at the very beginning said, when you get out, when you pick your topic, you need to be able to wrap your arms around this issue for 10 years past graduation. And it's been closer to 20 years now past graduation, and you can see that I'm still passionate about this. I have the privilege of having a program at the School of Health Professions at the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center that is a Bachelor of Science in Healthcare Disparities, Diversity, and Advocacy. This is a fabulous program because it takes people who have an associate's degree but want a bachelor's degree because they'll get better money, they'll get better opportunities for employment, but teaches them how to advocate for patients in disparate conditions with diverse living conditions and diverse health and family conditions. So since I've been at MD Anderson and with this program, I'm the program director of it. And since I've been here, the program has tripled in size, and it is a 100% fully online program with some synchronous and mostly asynchronous courses. One of the exciting things is that during COVID, as all the other programs were losing enrollment, this program was growing. And so it never took a step back. It has just continued to grow. And so it's a fabulous program. And I have developed a master's degree program in health equity leadership that will also be online. It is waiting for approval before we launch it. So that'll be happening in the near future. So that's an exciting thing that is coming up at MD Anderson with my program. In 2017, I was put on the advisory committee for homeless veterans, which is an advisory committee, a board-appointed committee that advises the President and Congress of issues that are facing veterans, particularly those who are homeless, and what recommendations we had as a board to improve their conditions. In 2017, the President has a top 5 priority list, and he removed the veteran homelessness from that list in 2017, and he replaced it with an equally important issue, and that was preventing veteran suicide. And so at that time, we were very concerned because we were getting reports from different communities about ending functional homelessness. And functional homelessness is when a veteran wants to be housed, then they are housed. There are veterans who do not want to be housed, and that is a fact. And people have argued with me about that because they don't believe that it's true that anybody would want to be homeless. And yet, go back to what I said about the veterans are trained to be homeless, and they're trained to rely on their community, which they find in a homeless community. And they support each other and they take care of each other. And so it is true that there are some who would prefer to be homeless. So I started advocating for combining suicide prevention and veteran homelessness into one because they go hand in hand. There are many factors that go along with veteran homelessness, and that is a major one. And before I rotated off the committee in 2021, it was finally put back on the top 5 list of presidential priorities. So that was a huge win for us. And I was very proud of that when that happened. As nurses, we can all do that. I didn't just fall into this, but it's something that I'm clearly passionate about. But we can all make an impact at all levels, whether it's local, state, national, or even globally.